Today, I'm breaking down everything you guys need to do to get ready for your fantasy football playoffs. These are moves you need to make right now, stashing players, stashing running back handcuffs, stashing defenses, kickers, quarterbacks, and tight ends to make sure that you guys take your playoff appearance, which if you're watching this video, you're probably in or about to be in the playoffs, into a fantasy football championship. So the majority of this video is going to be basically me breaking down why we stash handcuffs, which handcuffs to stash on your bench for your fantasy football playoff run. And I'll go through kind of the in-depth kind of handcuff scores that I gave these guys, and I ranked them all based on priority of who I think you should pick up. And then I'll also go through like what quarterbacks to stash if you're streaming quarterback, tight ends to stash if you're streaming tight end, defenses and kickers as well. So let's talk about stashing handcuffs. First of all, handcuffs are backup running backs, just to make sure that I'm getting everybody covered here. Why we're stashing backup running backs is this. Running backs at this point in the season are pretty much the only pieces in fantasy football that can see a significant upgrade in value and usability from fantasy football perspective because volume is directly transferable. So if there's a team out there with a clear starting running back, say the Packers and Josh Jacobs, if Josh Jacobs goes down, we know that Emmanuel Wilson, who is his direct backup, will have fantasy value. It's very rare at this point in the season that you'll see a quarterback breakout or a wide receiver breakout or a tight end breakout. Maybe some rookie wide receivers or rookie tight ends will start to play better, but for the most part, it is mainly running backs at this point in the season. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance that your team is in the playoffs or about to be in the playoffs. You probably have a good team. You probably have, very little holes on your roster. You have good wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and flexes. The only way that you're going to get usability off of the waiver wire at this point in the season is a handcuff getting a starting job. That takes away a potential starter also from your opponents if you have that handcuff on your bench and your opponent doesn't. Say, for example, this week, Kyron Williams got banged up and Aaron Jones got banged up. If you have Blake Corum or Jordan Mason on your bench right now, that takes away a potential starter from the other playoff teams in your league and also gives you maybe a potential option that you can use. And I talk about this every single year in fantasy football because this strategy has won me a league. In 2021, in my home league, I started Rashad Penny, who was a backup running back heading into the playoffs, Darrell Williams, and Sony Michel of the Chiefs and Rams, all in the fantasy title game, all handcuff running backs who appeared in this video during week 12 of the 2021 season. I actually had no business winning my league that year. My team was not that good. I snuck in as the 5 seed, but by rostering handcuffs on my bench, I was in possession of some of those league-winning waiver wire ads that I started during my title run. Whether you're the 1 seed looking for depth or taking away players from your league mates, or you're the 6 seed looking for a boost heading into the playoffs, this strategy can help you a ton. Last year, I'm sure there's people who had Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears from week 15 to 17, Tony Pollard went down, and Tajay Spears scored 20 points per game in the fantasy football playoffs because Pollard went down when it mattered most. So throughout this video, what I want you guys to do basically is look at your bench spots strategically. Let's say you have 5 or 6 benches in your league. Make sure you account for whatever bye weeks you have in week 14 and whatever maybe backups that you need because of injury. Count how many bench spots you have that are throwaways, guys that you don't need. If you're rostering like a Darius Slayton or some random wide receiver that is never going to see the light of day in your lineup, you can drop players like that for these upside swings. So just determine how many spots you're going to do that with. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4. A good rule of thumb is that you probably only need 1 to 3 max startable guys on your bench, and then the rest of them you can kind of just use as handcuffs. And because the bye weeks are going to be over after next week, and if you don't have any buys left, then there's even more reason for you to stash these guys. The rest can be just upside pieces like handcuffs primarily, or if you want to plan ahead at quarterback, at tight end, at defense, or at kicker. We'll talk about those later in the video as well. So what I did in today's video is I broke down a handcuff score for all of the backup running backs around the NFL, assuming a world in which we nuked all the starting running backs in the league, who would be the most valuable handcuffs for fantasy. And I did this on a number of different levels, whether it was talent, which I used PFF grade, yards per attempt, an elusive rating, yards after contact, all that stuff goes into elusive rating. I used that to measure how good the running back has been this season. I also used volume, which is like, okay, what kind of workload would they get if the starter went down ahead of them? And a lot of the times I wanted to use evidenced volume as well. So like we've had a sample of this guy being the starter this year, last year, the year before that. And also, I wanted to factor in, would they get the third down work? Would they have to split that kind of work? And then situation, I factored in their strength of schedule in adjusted fantasy points allowed during the fantasy playoffs and how good of a team they play for. How good is their offense in points per game? How many wins does their team have? And that gave you an overall handcuff score. And that's kind of how I weighted these guys based on priority. Because ideally, if you're picking up a handcuff, there is a major difference between picking up a handcuff who's on a bad team with not a great workload versus picking up a handcuff who's a bell cow on a great offense. So that's why we want to go, okay, RB1 upside territory handcuffs, are they going to be available? Yes. Okay, we'll pick up one of those. The rest of them are not available in our league. Then we go down to the next tier of handcuffs and we stash somebody from there. So tier 1, RB1 upside, guys, these were the highest handcuff score running backs. Kyle Menengai, Zach Charbonnet, Brian Robinson, Kenneth Gainwell, and David Montgomery. Menengai scored 22.8 PPR points in the only game that DeAndre Swift missed this season. He has 5 top 24 scoring weeks in 5 of his last 7 games, and the Bears are a good team in their run game, and Ben Johnson's calling it up. Their O-line's great. Kyle Menengai is one of the best handcuffs out there, which is why he's rostered in 65% of leagues. Zach Charbonnet, also a highly decorated handcuff. Last year, Kenneth Walker missed 6 games. In those games, Charbonnet played 95, 85, 79, 79, 76, and 77% of the snaps in those games that Walker missed, scoring as a top 20 running back in 5 of those 6 games and a top 7 scoring running back in 3 of those 6 games. So this is a dude that absolutely would be a league winner if Kenneth Walker went down. Brian Robinson has not had a chance to start for CMC because CMC has not missed any time. But as we know, Christian McCaffrey is prone to injury at this point in his career. And last season, Mason, Garendo, and Patrick Taylor all had weeks where they were the starter for the 49ers. And that resulted in 8 top 24 scoring weeks for whoever the starting running back was when Christian McCaffrey was out. And Brian Robinson's actually a better running back than a lot of those guys. So I believe he would be a major league winner if CMC went down. Make sure he is rostered. He's the only one in this tier that is widely available. So he would be priority number 1 if you're taking anything away here as who you need to be stashing heading into the playoffs. Kenneth Gainwell scored 31.4 PPR points in the only game that Jaylen Warren missed this season. He had 77% of the snaps in that game, plus 2 other top 10 scoring weeks this season, even with Warren healthy. So we know he's playing well. We know they use him out of the backfield as a receiver, especially. He is a high priority stash as well. David Montgomery, only 1 game in Jahmyr Gibbs' career has he actually been out and David Montgomery was healthy. That was week 5 of 2023. David Montgomery scored 20.9 PPR points in that game on a 75% snap share. So with that top tier, if anybody's available, go pick them up, go stash them. If they're not available, then we move down to the next tier, which is kind of the high-end RB2 upside guys. Tank Bigsby, Kamani Vidal, and so on. Tank Bigsby is PFF's number 1 graded running back right now. We have absolutely no sample of Saquon Barkley being out and Tank Bigsby being in because he's only been on the team for 1 season. But in week 8, when the New York Giants game came up, Saquon Barkley had a big game in that one, but he had a groin injury, so he missed a little bit of the second half. Tank Bigsby rushed for 100 yards on just 9 carries in the only game this season where he's seen more than 5 carries. So for me, I think he's a very underrated stash. He is widely available, the type of guy that if Saquon Barkley went down in week 14 or in week 15 or whatever, Tank Bigsby would be a blow all of your fab on him every week, top 15 to 20 scoring play, and definitely needs to be rostered for those of you guys stashing for your fantasy playoffs. Kamani Vidal, of course, is currently the starter for the Chargers right now, but he is technically a handcuff. He's been a top 8 fantasy scoring running back in 4 of his last 7 games without Amari and Hampton out there. Amari and Hampton's coming back, but don't drop Kamani Vidal. Keep him on your bench because we know what he can be when Amari and Hampton is out. Ramondre Stevenson, I guess him and Trevion Henderson are technically like co-starters, but Stevenson has been dropped in some leagues since his injury. He has 3 top 18 scoring weeks out of the 6 games that he started, and he led the team in touches in those games. Corum, also a very good option. He looks great. He scored 14.1 PPR points in week 13, despite Kyron Williams only actually missing a couple of snaps, a couple of series with that ankle injury. He's great. The offense is great. And we know Sean McVay likes to feed his guys a bell cow workload, so make sure he is rostered, especially if Kyron Williams is still dealing with that injury coming up this week. I'm sure I'll talk about him in tomorrow's waiver video. Rashad White scored top 10 in 2 weeks this season, plus he outsnapped Sean Tucker in every single game. So I get that if Bucky goes down again, Rashad White and Sean Tucker are both usable, and it would be a committee to some degree, but both are relevant, and Rashad White would be my preference, at least as of right now. Tajay Spears, like I said, is the poster child for why we need to be doing this, because last year he was the RB7 in points per game from weeks 15 through 17 when Tony Pollard went down. He ended up being a piece that got a lot of us to the Best Ball Mania final, ourselves included. We got to the Best Ball Mania final on Spicy's account because we had Tajay Spears. That was a big part of it. So Tajay Spears, even though he plays for a bad team that's going to have the first overall pick, that was true last year, and he ended up being a league winner. So don't underrate him because he's a good back who catches the ball. Jordan Mason was a top 24 back in 3 of the 4 games without Aaron Jones this season. Aaron Jones now has a shoulder injury, so again, he's going to be kind of relevant on waivers this week because if Jones misses time, he's actually going to be realizing this potential, realizing this upside. And JJ McCarthy, as bad as he is better than Max Brosmer, and he should be back after his concussion knocked him out for week 13. Bijan Robinson has never missed a game in his career, so even though Tyler Algier is in theory a great handcuff, in week 7 of 2023, there was that game that Bijan was active but not playing much. Algier scored as the RB15 that week with 14.2 points per game, but the Falcons aren't a very good team, so that does downgrade Tyler Algier just a little bit, but we know he's great. We know he would get the workload if Bijan were to go down. Chuba Hubbard and Dowdle, kind of similar to the Ramondre Stevenson thing. They're basically co-starters, but technically Chuba Hubbard is his handcuff. Top 12 running back in points per game last year when he was a starter, so we know that if Dowdle went down, Chuba Hubbard would end up being a league winner. Again, if any of those guys are available, go roster whichever is your favorite. I think they're all very similar. They all have similar handcuff scores, which is why they're all in the same tier. If you love the idea of Tank Bigsby being the starter for the Eagles, go roster him. If you love Blake Corum, go roster him. Whatever guy you really like in this territory, Bigsby and Corum are the most widely available, so I would say they are your best bet as far as who you could be stashing. Tier 3, again, I can speed through these ones a little bit more. We have some RB2 volume plays. My favorites in this tier are Byshell Tootin, who's like a rookie. He's got upside. He's on a run-heavy team. If ETN went down, he'd probably be great. Emmanuel Wilson, who was a top 24 running back in the games that Jacobs was banged up in, and he was RB2 overall in the only game that Jacobs actually missed with an injury. Plus, we know Jacobs is currently dealing with those injuries still. Ray Davis is legit talented. He plays for the Buffalo Bills. Yes, Ty Johnson would be involved, but James Cook missed week 6 of last season, and Ray Davis scored 18.2 PPR points, and he played limited in week 18 last season, and Ray Davis scored 14.5 PPR points, both of which were top 15 scoring running backs on those specific weeks. Keaton Mitchell, career 6.7 yards per carry. If Derrick Henry ever went down, I think Keaton Mitchell could be a very, very big league winner, and he is widely available. So a guy that if you're in a deeper league and none of these guys are available that I'm talking about, he should be in your league. Plus, Derrick Henry's older, so it's possible that he would actually go down. Again, these other guys are not as interesting. Isaiah Davis, Ollie Gordon, Samaje Perine, Nick Chubb. Probably usable if the starter went down around them, but I do think they're more lower priority stashes, and if you have a very good team, then there's a possibility they still wouldn't find your starting lineup. And then these other guys like Malik Davis, Devin Neal, Dylan Sampson, whatever, again, maybe they'd be usable. Maybe you want to stash them just to take them away from your league mates in case the starter went down, but for the most part, they're pretty much lower priority unless you're in deeper leagues. And Neal's a good example of this because Neal is currently the starter for the Saints. He's realizing his handcuff potential, but he's only scored 11.1 and 9.9 PPR points since Kamara has been out because he plays for a bad team. So ultimately, line your bench with 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, however many bench spots you can hold. Line your bench with these handcuffs. Prioritize the ones that you like the most. Try and stay within the tiers if you can, factoring in all the stuff that I've mentioned. Ideally, we get a guy who's going to have a big workload, who's talented, and who's going to be on a good offense. If he just has a big workload and he's on a bad offense, that still means a decent stash. Just make sure that you're trying to check as many of those boxes as you can. If you're a playoff team, you got to remember that your team is probably good. You probably don't want to stash any of these guys unless they would actually hit your lineup if the starter ahead of them went down. So keep that in mind. If you're like, oh, should I stash Raheem Mostert? It's like, well, would you start Raheem Mostert if Genty went down? If the answer is no, then you probably don't have to. So moving into the other positions, the other ones that you could be stashing, let's talk about quarterback strength of schedule, best matchups by week. So what you can do with the quarterback position, if you guys are streaming, is you can pick one quarterback that has a great schedule the entire time. You can mix and match quarterbacks. Let's say one quarterback has a good week 15 and 17, another quarterback has a good week 16, and you want to plan ahead and roster 2 quarterbacks for the rest of the season. All of that's well and good. Week 15, Jackson Dart gets Washington, Matthew Stafford gets Detroit, Sam Darnold gets Indianapolis, Trevor Lawrence versus New York Jets, and Tua Tagovailoa at Pittsburgh. You can see the schedules on the screen as I'm talking. Week 16, Justin Herbert at Dallas, Bo Nix versus Jacksonville, Brock Purdy at Indianapolis, Jared Goff versus Pittsburgh, Jordan Love at Chicago, Daniel Jones versus San Francisco, and Tua versus Cincinnati. And then in week 17, in the fantasy championship, you have Dak Prescott at Washington, Brock Purdy versus Chicago, Caleb Williams at San Francisco, Daniel Jones versus Jacksonville, Baker Mayfield at Miami, Jacoby Brissett at Cincinnati, and Tua Tagovailoa versus Tampa Bay. Those are like week by week the good matchups. You can use some of the ones I just said, mix and match, roster 2 quarterbacks, or if you're just like, I just want to roster 1 quarterback for all of week 15 through 17, Matthew Stafford has a great schedule all 3 weeks. Tua Tagovailoa has a great schedule all 3 weeks, although just as a fantasy quarterback is not as good as some of the other options. Daniel Jones has a pretty good schedule all 3 weeks. Brock Purdy has a pretty good schedule all 3 weeks. If you have a bye, for example, and you only need week 16 and 17, you could see that Brock Purdy becomes very enticing with at Indianapolis versus Chicago. Daniel Jones versus San Francisco versus Jacksonville, both at home. Jordan Love at Chicago versus Baltimore. Tua Tagovailoa again versus Cincinnati and versus Tampa Bay. Again, use that information with what you will. Do you want to roster 2 quarterbacks? Do you want to roster 1 quarterback? Do you just need 1 week fill-in for that week 17 matchup that your 1 quarterback that you have, it doesn't have a good matchup? You can kind of mix and match that as you go. When it comes to fantasy defenses, you guys can see them on the screen. Houston, New York Giants, New Orleans Saints, and Tampa Bay are usable all 3 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. So if you only want to roster 1 defense, try and secure Houston specifically because they're just such a great defense overall. New York Giants, New Orleans Saints, and Tampa Bay also a very good defense in general because they blitz a lot and they get a lot of turnovers. You could roster one of those defenses for the rest of the season and be totally fine with them. If you're looking to combo defenses, and I think a lot of people do like to do this, some of my favorite combo defenses, if you're looking to roster 2 heading into the fantasy playoffs, is getting a defense like Pittsburgh, who has a good week 15 and 17 matchup, and then pairing them with Buffalo, who faces Cleveland, or the Jets, who face New Orleans in week 16, Kansas City, who faces Tennessee in week 16, Atlanta, who faces Arizona in week 16. You can pair Pittsburgh with one of those defenses, and then you have your defensive bases covered. Kansas City has a good week 15 and 16 matchups, and you can pair them with Tennessee in week 17 versus New Orleans, or Detroit at Minnesota, or New England at New York Jets, or Las Vegas versus New York Giants, or Seattle at Carolina. You can pair Kansas City with one of those defenses. Or you can take just the week 15 matchup. Philadelphia, Chicago, and Carolina have good matchups. And then the Jets face 2 good matchups in week 16 and 17 at New Orleans versus New England. And then the Bengals face at Miami versus Arizona in week 16 and 17. So a couple different options for you there. Just mix and match the defenses. Use the charts that you guys can see on the screen and kind of plan ahead if you can. If you guys are on bye in week 15 and you only need a defense for week 16 and 17, you do see that the Giants, the Bengals, the Texans, the Saints, the Bucks, and then again, you can kind of mix and match the rest of those if you just need a defense for those 2 weeks. And then moving into the tight end position, again, if you need to stream tight ends, I think you're probably better off finding a schedule that is good for weeks 15 through 17, so you're not rotating every single week. But some of the tight ends that do have really good matchups are Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Brenton Strange, who I would say are like the tier 1 streamers because Andrews plays for the Ravens. They should bounce back. Darren Waller's been, heavily involved in the red zone and whatnot. Brenton Strange gets a lot of targets. Those are like the premier streamable tight ends who are available in a lot of leagues. And then if you're looking to kind of mix and match or go for lower options, Cade Otton, AJ Barner, and Mason Taylor are all within range. Obviously, you can see there that like Tyler Warren and George Kittle and McBride have great schedules as well, but those are every week starters. They're not available on anybody's waiver wires, but good for those of you guys that do have those players, knowing that they do have good schedules. And then finally, getting into the kickers here, Brandon Aubrey, the Cowboys kicker, Cam Little, the Jaguars kicker, and Houston's Kaimi Fairbairn, primo kickers to help win your league. If you can get either of those 3 kickers, go ahead and do it because they're great real-life kickers. They are scoring great in fantasy, and they also have good schedules. But Jake Bates of the Lions, Jake Elliott of the Eagles, Brandon McManus of the Packers, and Andy Borregales, I don't know how to say that, of the Patriots, those are all good options as well. If none of the guys that I just mentioned are available, you can always default to this formula that I like to use for kickers. Number 1, find kickers who are scoring well in fantasy. Just go to Fantasy Pros, sort by kicker scoring, and see who's available that way. Bonus points, if they have a lot of 50-plus yard field goals, that means their teams trust them. And in most kicker scoring leagues, you get like 5 points for those. Number 2, find guys who are on good teams, who are on good offenses that score a lot of points, ideally who are going to be in a lot of high over-under games over the next couple of weeks. Like, for example, you get like the Chiefs kicker going up against the Buffalo Bills or the Broncos or the Bengals or something. That game's going to be high scoring, so you're going to want to target kickers from those types of game environments. And I like to target kickers that are on teams with conservative head coaches. Like, for example, D'Amico Ryans is a conservative head coach. Todd Bowles is a conservative head coach. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, these types of teams, Matt LaFleur, conservative head coaches who run great offenses, but they do settle for field goals. They don't go for it on fourth down. Like, as much as we love Dan Campbell, the one thing that he hurts is Jake Bates, who is a great kicker who would kick a lot more field goals if they didn't go for fourth downs as much. So conservative coaches who can move the ball in between the 20s. Mike McDonald of the Seahawks also comes to mind for that, because the Seahawks move the ball at will, but then they sometimes settle for field goals. Same goes for John Harbaugh in Baltimore. So that's the kicker rundown. We don't talk about kickers too much on this channel, so I thought I'd give you guys some advice there. But those are the must-stash players for the fantasy playoffs. These are the moves that you need to be making, because it's not enough to be the number 1 seed in your league or be the number 3 seed in your league or sneak into the playoffs or whatever. You need to be doing everything in your power this time of year to make sure that you are hoisting that trophy and not one of your league mates. There's a reason that I won the championship in my home league in 2021. I did not have the best team, not even one of the best 3 teams in that league, but I was doing my due diligence, picking up Darrell Williams when he walked into the starting role for the Chiefs, picking up Sony Michel when he was the Rams starter, picking up Rashad Penny when he started for the Seahawks that year. If I didn't do that, I don't win that championship. So you got to be diligent. Unless your team is God Squad, you have all the best players in fantasy football, in which case none of this will matter. But if your team is among the group, one of the top 3 to 5, top 4 to 6 teams in your league, then you need to be doing your due diligence, picking up the players you need to pick up. And whatever your weakest position is, I'm sure you kind of scrolled around in this video, depending on what you were looking for. If you were looking for quarterback stuff, you got it. If you were looking for tight end, defense, kicker stuff, you got it. If you were just looking for the stashing handcuff stuff, you got that as well. So if you enjoyed this video, leave me a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and of course, leave any comments down below. I'd be happy to help you if you guys are like, hey, who should I pick up between this guy and this guy? Obviously, I would say refer to the tier list that I talked about, but if you have specific team context or whatever, then I can definitely let you know about that. And also, if you're hoping to stash your own handcuffs too, I think that's very much okay at this time of year. If you're like, I have Bijan Robinson and I have Tyler Algier available, I just want to pick up Algier in case Bijan goes down, I think that's totally fair, because it could make or break you winning your championship or not at this point in the year. I'm more against it at the beginning of the season, but at this time of year, if you want to roster your own handcuffs, that's totally fine with me. So throughout the playoff weeks, we're also going to try and do tier lists for the other positions. We normally only do running back and wide receivers. If we have time to, I might try and do QB and tight end tier lists as well, going into those specific game environments. Let us know if you guys would want to see that. All of our rankings, everything available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for a 7-day free trial and an annual team review if you guys sign up for the annual Mother Flocker package. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.